you so much, Mr. Rufai. Um, I must say, I agree with him. He's not that hard hitting, he's very passionate, and I'm a fan of his. So, good morning, everybody. DG Nita, good morning. And distinguished ladies and gentlemen, please allow me to stand on existing protocol. So my name is Olatubosun Alake. I'm the special advisor to the governor of Lagos on innovation and technology. I'm representing the governor here today. He couldn't be here. He wanted to, but other duties came up. And so I wanted to convey his words to us. A topic that was given to us from Tech Next called Regulating for Prosperity. The Lagos example. And I'll just be going through some of the words, but I would also be adding a few things because Lagos, as you well know, is a giant in Nigeria, and there are so many things happening. But I think we face many existential challenges today, not just in Lagos, but in Nigeria as a whole. And we are quite bullish about the position of Lagos, not just in Nigeria, but on the African continent. And so with that, Lagos, with a GDP figure of almost 150 billion US dollars and a population of around 22 million, there exists within Lagos a tremendous amount of potential to deliver on real economic value for its citizens. Lagos's economy is larger than that of Kenya, Ghana, and Ivory Coast. And so Lagos in itself represents the economic engine of the entire northern part of sub-Saharan Africa. And so Lagos, if you take Lagos as a country on its own, it will be between the 6th and the 8th largest economy in Africa, right? That's how very important this state is. And there exists within Lagos tons of potentials like you seated in this room. But in equal measure are the challenges it presents in relation to socioeconomic management, in terms of demographics, and of course in terms of climate change. Lagos, as it stands today, is about a third of Nigeria's gross domestic product. Of course, with leading sectors in telecoms, finance, real estate, retail, digital technology, and other service sectors. A diverse and educated workforce, a progressive business and entrepreneurial environment, and a relatively stable regulatory environment are major contributory factors to the dynamism that exists within Lagos. One of the key factors for driving sustained economic growth, as we all know, is regulation. Getting regulation right, more often than not, constitutes striking the right but sometimes uneasy balance. This balance must be struck between factors such as risk and reward, environmental protections versus industrial output, value creating incumbents versus new innovative newcomers, present trade-offs versus future earnings. And so when regulations are being formed, there are tons of factors that one has to look at, right? There are people creating value currently, and there are people coming to disrupt or to change the type of value that is being created. These are some of the uneasy balances that formulation of regulation must take into account. So let me give an example. In cryptos, for instance, questions regulators must need to grapple with include what risks are engendered by a currency that is not issued by a central bank. So if we understand the DNA of central banks, right? Central banks are made to protect the financial system. In fact, central banks came out of trouble. Central banks were born out of unease, instability. If anybody knows about the Great Depression or the financial crisis of the stock market crash in 1929 and the Great Depression that followed, you would know that the Federal Reserve in the US was born out of a lot of what happened there as a central regulator to protect investors, to protect the financial markets. And even till today, the Federal Reserve strikes an uneasy balance by, either reducing interest rates or keeping interest rates high, depending on where the economy is or depending on how they want to stimulate it. So they're always trying to strike a balance. And so there are major trade-offs, because if you raise interest rates, you want to cool inflation, but at the same time, people will not be able to borrow. And so there'll be less economic activity. That's trade-offs. So some people are going to be out of a job, but at least you will cool inflation and people will be able to still afford some certain things. And so regulation, getting regulation right, requires a balancing act. The same thing, if you look at companies like Uber, for instance, and the Taxi Association in New York City, for instance, right? And, the loss of jobs of one sector and the innovating of that same sector. Innovation is very good, but at the same time, when those people that are out of a job now come and complain to government that, you need to protect us from this. So the government has to spend to retrain, to do certain things, to be able to keep at least the economy chugging, people in jobs. And so there's a lot of striking the balance across different industries. And I think we as citizens have to understand what regulators face, the decisions. So the question I would ask is, if you were the central bank governor, what would be your approach? What tools will you have in your arsenal to be able to strike that balancing act? So a currency that is not issued by a central government, right, does not have certain safety guards with it. So how would you regulate that? So let me tell you what the central bank is looking at. In 2019, for instance, about $300 million was stolen from 12 major crypto hacks, right? Now, that is people's real earned money, right? Are there any protections? Today, if, say, a bank fails, the Nigerian Depositors Insurance Corporation insures your deposits up to 250,000 naira. But if you get robbed from a crypto exchange, you are on your own. And so the regulators have to study what kinds of safety nets they must put in some of these new technologies that are advancing. So it's also important for innovators to understand the complex legislative issues that relate to these things, so that, in fact, you could even walk to the central bank and say, you know what, guys, I know what you are going through. Let me take the risk, right? I will do a sandbox for you so that you can get the results from testing these new cryptocurrencies or these new currencies. Your understanding of what they face might even lend you to be of more value to them. So it's very important we understand some of these complexities, right? In medical science, for instance, how do you ensure the unintended consequences of gene editing does not tamper with the fundamental human genomic makeup, right? So when you look at advances in precision medicine, when you look at advances in gene editing, so people want a certain kind of color, right, for their children, or a certain height. And so this has taken them to manipulating the DNA. Now, you have to look, what are the consequences of that, right? And so what regulation tries to do is study what the consequences are, and put safety nets or safety guards in place so that the fundamental makeup of the human genome is not tampered with. So you have to understand these as well so that you can be of value in the regulation process. How do you regulate and minimize the occurrence of fake news, right? Everybody has a voice on social media now, but there's a ton of fake news going around. How do you regulate that? If you've been watching the US Congress of late, recently they've been summoning a lot of the heads of the social media companies, Google, Facebook, even Apple device manufacturers, right, to see how they can tame occurrences of fake news, because we all know how that turned the 2016 election in the US and the emergence of Donald Trump. And so regulators are grappling with the fact that, okay, people need to be free to express themselves, but what is the level of responsibility that you must have? Can you pay if you say something about somebody and it's not correct? What is the level of consequences that you are held accountable to? Because words do have power. And so how responsible should you be? And how responsible should the company that is giving you a platform be in regulating what you say and making sure that they are facts and not alternative facts? So these questions, they pose serious socioeconomic consequences. In Lagos, we are fully aware that regulation must be kept in step with advancing technology sectors. So we are not unaware of the advancing areas in financial technology, in agri-tech, in the gig economy. And technology entrepreneurs today would find that Lagos State is one of the more improving environments to do business, not only attributing to its large market size and dynamic labor force, but in its regulatory and civic friendliness to technology development. Now, I don't say this lightly, because Lagos State, more than other places in the Federation, have experienced the tremendous share of growth in terms of technology. At least between 2019 and 2021, in 2019, about between $600 to $700 million in venture capital investment came into Lagos. By 2021, it was in Nigeria, 2019, about $600 to $700 million in venture investment came into Nigeria. In 2021, around 1.7 billion, right? So more than 120% increase. 70% of those funds are coming into Lagos startups, right? Apart from that, over the past 6 months, about $1 billion in data center investment has poured into Lagos, right? Because of some of the investments we are making and some of the regulations we are pioneering. And let me take you through some of the things that we are doing in Lagos to be able to enable technology and to drive it, to drive value addition in this segment. Number one is our investments in metro fiber. I'm sure if people have been going around, you've been seeing a lot of digging of late and us spreading a lot of technology infrastructure, fiber optic cables and things like that. So I can tell you today we've spread about 2,900 kilometers of fiber optic infrastructure in Lagos, right? We are about to launch the first phase of 3,000 kilometers. And it's not only fiber that we are putting, we're also putting duct infrastructure so that a company like MTN or Airtel, they say they want to put fiber optic cables across the city. They don't need to dig the ground anymore. They can just use the existing ducts that we've put in the ground. And that saves them a ton of money in terms of the deployment costs, and hopefully they can pass on those savings to customers. So this is something that we've been doing over the past 2.5 years. Landed fiber about 100 public schools, and we are also deploying to public hospitals as well, right? So that high capacity fiber can exist within those locations. So telemedicine, distance learning at least becomes a reality. Also, across this fiber optic network, we're also deploying smart cameras and intelligent transport systems across the city as well. There are some locations that actually have ITS systems, that's intelligent transport systems. So if you run the red light at certain junctions, when you go to renew your license plate, you will get a ticket, right? Otherwise, you are not able to renew. So we are going to increase the deployment sites for that now, so that last mile won't even bother you anymore. If you run the red light, the camera will just take you, and your license plate will be connected to your profile. So that again will reduce the friction between enforcement and the citizens. Today, we're also in the startup ecosystem. Today, through the Lagos State Science Research and Innovation Council, we funded over 45 startups with grants between $9,000 and $12,000. I mean, depending on where the Naira is today. We've supported them in a lot of startup funding. And we also fund R&D initiatives in the universities. Today, we've done about 50 R&D projects in the universities. And we got our first patent in 2020. So, as you well know, Lagos State now produces patents, right? And these patents can be harbingers of wealth, where you can build companies around them and give services, products and services. In terms of legislation, I'm sure some of us are familiar with the Nigerian startup bill that just passed through the third reading in the House of Assembly. We were significant contributors to the startup bill as well. And what we are currently doing is domesticating that for Lagos. And so that a startup, when they want to incorporate, that process is much faster. When they need access to funding, that process is much faster. When they need other kinds of permits, when they need other kinds of resources, that process is seamless, right? And we are incorporating all of that into Lagos. So that startups don't have any issue in terms of access to funding, access to incorporating their business, access to all kinds of permits, and access to support. We are forming the Office of Startup Support, also in Lagos State, that would help the domestication of the startup bill. So that is also going on as well. We are also looking at the technology campus in Yaba. I must add that the emergence of Yaba, the Lagos State was also involved. The first fiber optic cable that was deployed in Yaba gave rise to a lot of the startups there. And it was Lagos State that actually gave the right of way at the time to Main One, that delivered the cable and saw the mushrooming of a lot of startups in that area. And of course, we also recognize that a very vibrant technology and startup ecosystem requires safety. And so we are also in the midst of designing the first cybersecurity policies for Lagos that will protect online businesses from all kinds of hacks and all kinds of online compromises. If I had time, I would speak about more, but this is just a snapshot of some of the things we are doing to be able to enable technology investment and startup activity in Lagos. And so it's very important that you know that Lagos will continue to drive enabling initiatives and policies that will put the state in a better stead. It's important that Lagosians, young people like yourselves, realize the complexities of civic governance and legislation. and do their part by participating actively in civic exercises, especially in engaging with your representatives. Wherever you live, whether in Ikeja, whether in VI, whether in Alimosho, you need to engage with your lawmakers, right? That relationship helps you to contribute positively to the legislation that is being formulated. And so we, on our part, will work even harder to make sure that we make Lagos the Lagos of your dreams. Thank you very much.